when the Timex Marlin Snoopy edition, or one of the Snoopy editions, popped up on ashford.com for $88 US, I pressed buy it now. I pressed buy now before I even thought through the decision. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And I think I'm pretty good at finding bargains. I'm pretty good at finding watches that are the right price for me, that I can afford and I can justify. And I do this in a couple of ways. I do this by being patient. I'm not rushing to buy watches. And I also do this by putting a lot of effort and thought and looking and researching watches. But occasionally, I think luck is certainly something that plays a part of this. And the watch that I bought today, this Timex Marlin Snoopy, luck was definitely the main reason I was able to purchase it. Because I just happened to look at ashford.com, I just happened to look up Timex for some reason, which I don't think I've ever searched on ashford.com, and here was this Timex Marlin Snoopy for $88 US. Unfortunately, it has sold out, and I think it sold out really quickly. But what it does show is that these watches that tend to be a lot more expensive, which is why I haven't bought one before, do become available occasionally at low prices. So it is worth keeping an eye out for them. And I want to share with you this particular watch because it's finally arrived and there's some things that really stood out to me. So let's flip the camera, and in a first impressions style video, let's check out my first Marlin and my first Snoopy watch. So here we have the Timex Marlin, one of the Snoopy editions. I quite like the packaging. It's fairly simple, but it's actually quite nice. It comes out pretty good. But I have to say, when this watch actually arrived, there were 4 things that really stood out to me. Let's first of all have a quick look inside this packaging. You can see the specific reference number of this particular model of Timex. But you can see it's actually presented quite nicely for a relatively affordable watch. As I mentioned, it was actually very affordable when I actually bought this one. I was lucky to get it on a very good sale. But yeah, there were 4 things that stood out to me as soon as this one arrived and as soon as I opened the box. And the first 2 things actually relate to the dial. Yes, okay, there's some obvious things of a Snoopy and some nice yellow color, which I think is a real nice pop to this sort of watch, but that's not actually what stood out to me. Firstly, it was the sunburst silver dial. There's actually a real sort of texture to it. It really sort of bursts out, especially when you get it in the right light. And I'll put some footage now of it outside to show you that sort of sunburst dial. But the second thing was still the dial. If you look at the outside of the dial or the edge of the dial, it curves down and away, which I think it looks absolutely fantastic. You know, it is a relatively simple watch if you sort of subtract Snoopy from this particular one. So having little features like that really sort of give it something a little bit extra. Got this beautiful sunburst dial with this nice curvature edge. And then what I wasn't expecting was the case design, which is the third thing that stood out to me. Check that out. It's all sort of one piece, but it sort of goes down, down, and around. It's almost like a bit of an angular style case, which is a bit different to what I expected, and I haven't really seen something specifically like that before. But the fourth thing I have to say that really stood out to me about this watch was how much it made me smile. This watch is a watch I think that is going to make you smile because of having Snoopy on the dial. For some reason, Snoopy seems to be a character that kind of sort of relates to a lot of people, or a lot of people relate to Snoopy as a character. I remember every Christmas the Peanuts cartoons would be on. There'd be like a Christmas special Peanuts cartoon, and Snoopy and Woodstock obviously were a part of that sort of a franchise. But what I do like about it is that it just adds a little bit of character to it, and I like this particular one because of the pop of yellow. I do seem to quite like pops of yellow on watch dials. It seems to be a thing for me at the moment. And having Woodstock there in yellow and having that nice yellow hand there is really cool. There were actually another couple of options when I went to buy this one, but this is the one that had that nice pop of color, which made me really sort of want this specific one. Overall, however, I think it is just quite a nice watch. I think it is a 40mm case diameter, which is a really good size for me. I think they're about 20mm lugs, I would assume. They look like 20mm lugs, so it's a 40-20, a nice size for me. And as you can see on my 6 3/4, or probably around about 17cm wrist, it really does sort of fit down and on my wrist nicely as well. Has this sort of vintage sort of style to it, but I do find some sort of vintage style watches, the lugs tend to sit a bit high and they almost float on top of your wrist. This one they don't. They actually sit down nicely, which I do actually really enjoy, and that's quite nice. Makes it really feel sort of grounded on my wrist. It's a watch that I'm really excited to actually have in my collection because it's sort of fun and affordable, but it's also a style of watch, this Marlin, that I've actually really wanted to get some hands on and wrist on experience with. Now, as always, I'm going to have this one on wrist for at least 4 to 6 weeks before I come back with a full review of it. Until then, maybe check out these videos next.